Have you ever wondered why the same people can speak the same language and yet seem completely different in every village? Why are some tall and light-eyed, others dark-skinned and squat, and others don't understand the dialect of the neighboring village at all? What if I told you that behind this chaos lies not an accident, but an ancient, powerful and multi-layered history? What if under the mask of a single people there is a real archipelago of ethnic groups united only by the illusion of a common name? Today we will take a look into the very heart of Dagestan, to where one of the most mysterious peoples of the Caucasus is hiding. The people they talk about are the king of the mountains, but no one fully understands who they are. The Avars, the most numerous people of Dagestan. More than 1 million people, dozens of sub-ethnic groups, hundreds of villages, dozens of dialects and many secrets. Their language is Avar. It would seem that everything is simple. But here is the first crack. This language is only a literary standard, which is far from always understandable to those who speak their native mountain dialects. In many villages, dialects are spoken in such a way that linguists have been arguing for a long time. Is this generally one language or a whole group of related ones? Now imagine that this linguistic confusion is just the tip of the iceberg. For hundreds of years, historians and ethnographers have been trying to understand, are the Avars an ancient monolith or a hand-assembled union of tribes? Version number 1 is the theory of unity. She claims that all Avars are descendants of one original group, which simply spread over the mountains and eventually split into dialects. They say it happens among mountain peoples, isolation does its job. It's a beautiful theory, but it began to collapse when data appeared that could not be ignored. Everything changed when genetics came into play, not linguists, not historians, laboratory, test tubes, DNA. The researchers took samples from representatives of different Avar communities, and what they saw called into question everything that seemed obvious. The first clue is the male line, the Y chromosome. This is the same genetic torch that is passed from father to son. If the Avars were a single people, we would expect to see one or two dominant haplogroups. But the reality turned out to be completely different. The picture of male lines among the Avars is not just diverse, it is fragmented. In some villages, haplogroup J1 prevails, a classic lineage of the eastern Caucasus associated with the ancient farmers of the Near East. In others, G2A is typical for the mountain peoples of Europe and the Caucasus, which has its roots in the Neolithic. Thirdly, R1A appears, a marker of the steppes and Indo-European migrations. How is this possible? The answer is in geography. Avars live in a territory where each village is like a separate planet. This is the edge of the gorges, where you can walk 3 days to the neighboring village along steep trails. Local communities have lived in isolation from each other for centuries, and each clan has evolved as a separate genetic system. Somewhere there were marriages with neighbors, somewhere refugees from other regions came, somewhere the founder effect was consolidated, when one male line dominates in a confined space. But the most striking thing is that even within the same Avar region, there may be a different genetic pattern. They are not one people in the usual sense. It is a federation of clans united by culture, but retaining genetic autonomy. And now the second clue is the female line, mitochondrial DNA. This is a genetic story that a mother passes on to all her children. Usually the female lines are more stable, and among the Avars, we see heterogeneity again, but with a different emphasis. Maternal lines indicate a powerful autochthonous layer. It's the same Caucasus, the same mountains. But here's the interesting thing, unlike the male line, where alien markers are sometimes found, there is almost no external influence in mitochondrial DNA. This suggests that there have been no large-scale invasions in the history of the Avars to replace the female population. Women are the root here, motionless and ancient. This means that even if at some point new men came, married local women, and merged the lines, it was the women who kept the local culture, language, and traditions. And now a completely new picture looms before us. The Avars are not a single people with an ancient tree whose branches simply parted. It's more like a forest, where each tree has a different root system, but they all grow in the same climate and under the same sun. They were united not by blood, but by fate. When the Arabs came, when the Russian Empire was advancing, when villages were burned, when khans collapsed and imams were created, at that moment the Avars became one people. Not by genetics, by choice. That's why their culture looks so diverse. Somewhere there are high tower fortifications, somewhere there is a tribal democracy. Somewhere there is a cult of ancestral honor, and somewhere there are milder forms of communal life. All these are not deviations. These are traces of different source models that ended up under the same name, Avars. Now you understand why Avars have so many subethnic names: Andalus, Kunzaks, Sumatans, Claritans, and dozens of others. It's not just geography. These are the remnants of those microsystems from which the modern Avar ethnic group was fused. And language is also an alloy. The literary Avar language was standardized on the basis of the Kunzak dialect, but in remote villages there are still forms of speech that no one understands except the locals. And each of these dialects may be an echo of an old language, perhaps of a people that has already disappeared. Perhaps that is why the Avars are one of the most stable peoples in the region. When you are built not as a monolith, but as a network, you cannot be broken with one blow. You will survive. Let one line disappear somewhere, and another will pick it up. Let one dialect be forgotten, the other will keep the song. Let the family disappear, his neighbors remember his traditions. Avar genetics is a lesson. The lesson is that the strength of a nation is not in uniformity, but in the ability to live alongside different people, the ability to be plural. To be a system where each part is a world, but together it is a people. So who are the Avars? These are not the descendants of a single hero. This is not a nation from the same ancestral homeland. It's a mosaic, the archipelago. A living federation of Caucasian families who found each other and decided to move on together. Their story is not a story of one blood. This is the story of an agreement. Difficult, complicated, with conflicts and reconciliations. But it was she who allowed them not only to survive, but to remain themselves. If you've watched it up to this point, write in the comments what surprised you the most. And which people would you like to take apart next? Subscribe, there are many more stories hidden in our DNA ahead.